Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Area 312. I'm one of your hosts, Kent, along with my co-host,
Rex,
and our other co-host,
Mike.
Hey, so friends, today we just wanted to see if we could get into our personal collections, and we're doing 10s today, albums that we think are a 10. You know, from tip to top, top to bottom, 2 thumbs up all the way, 10 efforts. And so we're just going to go around the horn one at a time. And I guess, you know, anywhere between 3 to 5 albums, an album a piece as we go around the horn, and we'll just throw up some 10s, albums that we think are flawless. So with that said, Mike, we'll start with you down at the bottom, and then we'll go this way. That way I'll be last, because the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. No, I'm teasing. So, Mike, we'll start with you, buddy.
So the first one I'm going with, and it's Petra album, and I got to be honest and say there's several Petra albums I could have picked for this, because they did some great ones that I think are 10s. One that I didn't pick that I very easily could have is this one, More Power to You. It's from the Greg Voles era. In my opinion, it's a perfect album. There's not a bad song on it. But for the most part, I kind of stuck with stuff that was a little harder edged, more from the mid to late 80s for my picks.
Would you say, Mike, that More Power to You, I know that wasn't your pick, but was that a 10?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, I'm prefacing this by saying there are several Petra albums that I consider 10s, and I could have picked any one of them. Mm-hmm. But I kind of decided to stick with music that was a little harder edged, so most of it's kind of probably coming from the mid to late 80s. So the one I went with, to me, and the album that came after it, Beyond Belief, are both 10s in my opinion. But I went with this one just because this is the album, the Petra album, that really blew my socks off when it came out, because it was so much heavier than anything else they'd ever done before. And it is, in my opinion, a flawless album. Even the ballads on it are good. And, you know, not a bad thing to say about it. The first 3 songs on this album, in my opinion, are absolutely iconic. Yep. For their heaviness, and just, you know, I mean, they just kind of came out of the gate and blew your face off with, like, Petra's metal now, you know, kind of thing, you know, I mean, so yeah, that's my number, or just my first pick, whatever.
So with that said, I absolutely love that album too. Yeah. It blew my socks off, and I remember that's when I officially, because I was a Greg X Volts fan, right? Because he was Greg X Volts era Petra is the lineup that, well, that was the band with Greg X Volts that introduced me to Christian rock back in '82, and you know, I was like, this stuff's great. So when John Schlitt came into the fold, I like John Schlitt. I appreciated John Schlitt, but there was a little trepidation, right? When that album came out, I was like, all right, I'm officially accepting John Schlitt. You know, he's got it going on. I will also say this about that album. I can tell you where I was at in '88 when that came out. When I first heard it, I had my little pickup truck driving to a friend's house, had popped that in after purchasing it at the store, popped it in, and I remember driving like, wow, you know, to his house, and I sat in the driveway for a little bit, listening to those first 3 songs, because by that time it was probably on Minefield. Before that, there was Hit You Where You Live. You know, before that it was, you know, is it Fired Up?
Fired Up.
Yeah. I remember having to sit in his driveway for just a minute before I got out because I'm like, I can't leave. This stuff's rocking, man. So anyway, great album, great choice. Rex, what do you got, buddy?
Yes. My first one that I'm picking is Guardian, Fire and Love, released in 1991. You know, the first album with Jamie Rowe on vocals, produced by John and Dino Elefante. I mean, the production on that is wonderful. You know, that thing would stand up to anything in mainstream rock when that came out. You know, and it starts out with Power of Love, and I'm like, holy cow. I mean, just from the gate, it just goes. Also, another song that I really like is Turnaround. You know, even the ballad is really good on there. You know, no song is a skipper. It's just flat out, man, I wish there was more bands like that at the time with that kind of music. So that's my first one.
Cool.
Yeah, you know, with that album, there's some great songs on there, obviously. And interestingly enough, one of my favorites from that album is also the song Turnaround. It's a great rocker, and I always wished it had gotten more attention than it did. And I ended up seeing Guardian live at a church back when I lived in North Dakota, and they'd been playing, and they took a little break, and I went up and I asked them, "Can you play Turnaround?" And they're like, "Man, maybe the first few chords. I don't, you know." So obviously, it's not something they were ever playing live, but yeah, it's a great song, and the whole album's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a great album. Kansas City, Missouri, for me, that's when I first picked that one up. And because, you know, it was different than the classic Guardian, right? The initial Guardian.
Yeah.
And so, you know, picked it up because it said Guardian. And I was a fan of First Watch. A different flavor, but a great album. And it's amazing. You know, I'm saying these places because it's amazing where good music, when it's good music, you don't forget it, and it can transport you. And it can, when you're listening to it in the present, it can transport you to some other, you know, realm in your mind, if you will. But now I'm looking at these things retrospectively, and it transports me to the past of when I first heard these albums. So yeah, great album because it puts me right back at my aunt's house in Kansas City, Missouri. So guys, I have a small plethora of albums here, and I'm not going to deep dive into all of them, okay? I'm going to pick and choose. I did want to briefly, I kind of chose some albums, guys. I went the route that maybe the road less traveled. For instance, here's what I mean. Let me throw out 3 quick names. Boston, their eponymous album. That's a straight up 10. That was like their greatest hits album straight out of the gate, right? But we all know that album. And if somebody doesn't, well, shame. Def Leppard, Hysteria. That's a 10. I think every song on that album, save for 3 or 4, made it into the Billboard, you know, top whatever. Now, that doesn't necessarily make, you know, a good album or good song or good band make, but it was a great album, Hysteria. That was a 10. But everybody knows Hysteria. I could say Kansas, Point of No Return. Okay, not a bad song on that album, a great progressive rock album. But people know Kansas. So with that said, I'm going the road less traveled just a little bit. I'm going to start out with this album, and this is a mainstream band. They're called Europe. I was a huge Europe fan when they came out. Of course, like a lot of people back in the 80s, 86, whenever the Final Countdown launched, and that made me a fan. I love their sound. I love that album, that song especially, but in 91, you remember Nirvana hit, right? With the grunge movement, with their Nevermind album. And so bands of this nature and caliber then fell by the wayside. What I've always liked about Europe, great musicality. Joey Tempest has a great singing voice, great melody. This album right here, it's a feel-good album. There's not a bad song on there. Most of the songs are upbeat. There's a few that were kind of power-oriented ballads. But when I put this album on, it just puts me in a feel-good mood. And I've always appreciated it for that. So I'm going to go with a 10, man. Europe, Prisoners in Paradise from 1991. Great album.
And you're right about that, Kent. That's one of the albums or bands that unfortunately, really were misfortunate with the whole grunge movement. That album was also produced by Beau Hill, I believe. So it's got awesome production on it too.
Yes, indeed. It surely does. So glad you know that, Rex. That's cool. Beau Hill. Yep, you bet. Mike?
Well, since we're talking mainstream, I'm going to say that I did not go the road less traveled. In fact, I picked the virtual template for a No Skippers album, the original Boston album.
Yep.
For obvious reasons that you've already talked about. But yeah, when this kind of question comes to mind, when we're talking about an album that is a total 10, every song is great. I mean, it's hard to get around this one because, like I said, it pretty much set the template for what that means. You know, you can go song to song on this album and you never get bored. I mean, it flows so well that it almost feels like you're listening to one continuous song that's just continually great, you know. And that was, for the first few albums, that's kind of the way it was for Boston, you know. Maybe slightly less so on the second album, but when they came back with Third Stage, again, another total 10 album there. So after that, it got a little more dicey. But but the albums after that, that's when, you know, they weren't using Brad Delp anymore. And to me, it all started to suffer. But this album set the stage for a 10 as far as I'm concerned. So
it certainly did. And I mean, that's excellent choice. That was in my thought process. You know, we all know Boston, but,
right.
But there's good reason.
Yeah.
Made such an impact.
But I will say this, when we get back into the Christian stuff, which I will in the next few, I did eventually go a little road less traveled with some of that. So
cool. Very cool. And maybe we need to have a program one time and call it Nines. You know, albums that are almost 10s.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. Don't look back. I mean, that's a close one. Is it a 9 or is it a 10? I mean,
yeah.
That had so many great songs on it too. And actually, it has my very favorite Boston song, which is "A Man I'll Never Be."
The second one, yeah.
That's just superb. But anyway, great choice with Boston. Rex, what you got, buddy?
Yeah, I'm going to pick one from the mainstream too that I think any one of you guys would pick, and that's the first Van Halen album. I mean, Eruption sounds as fantastic today as it did 41 years ago. That really shocked most people when that album came out, with just how incredible Eddie was. And, you know, he was probably the next big thing after Jimi Hendrix guitar wise, with showing you what could be done with a guitar that you wouldn't think was possible. David Lee Roth as their front man, you know, that was just a perfect match for those times. And you know, I mean, that album is just a classic 10.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you that when I was thinking about this, well, which mainstream one will I pick? And like I said, I ended up going with the road not less traveled. But the first three albums that came to my mind when I considered that question were the one I picked, the Boston album, the first Van Halen album, just like you, and the other one was Styx Paradise Theater. I could have come up with more, but those were the first three that came to my mind.
Who could argue with Van Halen? Just brought the music, brought the good time party with him, you know, just feel good music. So, yeah, can't argue with Van Halen, certainly. So, guys, another album here that I'll talk about a little bit explicitly. This is the 77s, and the album actually has no title. However, it actually did have a title. It was just censored by the label. The name of this album is called Pray Naked. This came out in 1992, and a buddy first introduced me to this band in 93, maybe 94. And he played the very first song. It's called Woody. And if you love the sound of Led Zeppelin, heavy Led Zeppelin, I mean, Woody is in that vein by 77s. And so they can rock with the best of them. They even did a Blind Willie Johnson cover of Nobody's Fault But Mine on their next album after this, Drowning with Land in Sight. And most people think that's a Led Zeppelin song. But 77s play it in the style of Zeppelin, but it's like almost note for note, and it's good. Anyway, a buddy introduced me to this album. It was after one of our bands, after my little band that I was in, we had played out in a different city, and we stayed all night at our friend's house who had sponsored us. And I heard snippets of this album, mostly just the first song. Well, Galesburg, Illinois. I was visiting my great uncle in 1994. I was just about to graduate college, and I walked into a bookstore, and lo and behold, this album was actually on display. And I'm like, hey, I remember that album. And so I snatched it and bought this. And so I was on spring break when I bought this. And I put this thing in. And so like I mentioned, Woody, it'll rock your socks off, the very first song. And then we have a little bit of the song's called Smiley Smile, and we have which is a little bit of a transition song. And that's kind of an homage to Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. And then we get to songs Phony Eyes, Kites Without Strings, Happy Roy, which is kind of in the vein of Roy Orbison. That's why it's called Happy Roy. Deep End, and The Rain Kept Falling in Love. Here's my point. Guys, you have this rocking number in Woody, and then you get to Kites Without Strings, Phony Eyes, The Rain Kept Falling in Love. These are extremely ambient and atmospheric, and I was blown away by the atmosphere that this album created. Lush melodies and harmonies. This was my first actual taste of 77s. And from here, I bought Drowning with Land in Sight, absolutely love that album. And then I started reverting in the catalog and buying their back catalog. The point is, this album made me a lifelong Sevens fan. And if there's some rocking numbers on here, but if you love atmosphere, ethereal sounding stuff, just great musicianship, this is the band, this is the album, 77's Pre-Naked.
They actually have,
Rick?
They actually, there's a couple albums that I would think would qualify for 10s out of their catalog. Some albums before that too. They just make really good quality music.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Mike, we're back to you, buddy.
All right. So my next pick is a Striper album. Shout out to all the Striper Drive people. Had a little bit of time though deciding which way to go here. Now, for me, it was between the first 3 releases. But my process of elimination went like this. Even though To Hell with the Devil, which might be a lot of people's obvious choice, definitely contains some of my all-time favorite Striper songs. If we do a show called Nines, that's where it would go, because All of Me is on there. And, I just can't say that's a 10. So, and then I considered, the Yellow and Black Attack. But the thing is that was originally released as an EP. And even though it's all good, and even though the re-release, for me, the other 2 songs were pretty darn good too. But the thing is, I decided to just look at it in its original release, which was a 6-song EP. And that left me with Soldiers, which I can't say there's a bad song on this album. As far as I'm concerned, they're all great. And so as far as being able to say, that's an absolute 10. It's a full length release. Every song great. Even the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I thought that was so awesome when I first heard that. It was like this kind of rocked out version of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I loved it. So the weakest song on the whole album is probably Together as One, but it's still a really good song, and so yeah, Soldiers, my next pick.
If I had to choose between Soldiers and To Hell with the Devil, I'd pick Soldiers any day of the week.
Yeah.
So, all right, Rex, we're back to you, buddy.
Okay, well, for my next one, this band only made 1 album, but I wish they would have made more because it is just incredible. And maybe some people might not even know about this band. And the band is Rage of Angels. Their album came out in 1989. It was produced by Doug Mann for Rex Music. No pun intended there. It just, I would call it heavy rock. There's double bass in there on the drums. The album cover is the first thing that'll get your attention. That if that doesn't scream heavy metal, and just with the 2 angels, I can't even explain it. It is incredible. I do believe it's on iTunes Music. I don't know if it's available just to get anywhere. I wish they would re-release that. my favorite song from that album is "Do You Still Believe in Love?" I mean, if that does not get you pumped up, and there's guitar solos in there by both of the guitarists, you know, you and me have Ken. I know we've talked about this band and album, and I'm just gonna probably say this. What you said is they were on par with Stryper musically. I think if they would have kept on going, I think they would have been like the next Stryper, possibly. Just unfortunate that there's only one album, but what an awesome album it is. So I highly recommend looking into that, guys.
Yeah, I second that motion. You know, great album, great band. I know their drummer John Fowler, and he is the late John Fowler. He has passed away in the earlier 2000s, or maybe, excuse me, might be mid 2000s. Yes, I believe around 2008. But John Fowler passed, the drummer, and he had gone on to be the drummer for Steelheart, as did Frank DiCostanzo, who was one of the guitarists for Rage of Angels. They joined Steelheart. But great band. Good choice, Rex. Good choice.
Thank you.
Let's see, guys. Mulling through the stack here. Oh, found a guitar pick. How about Phil Keaggy, Crimson and Blue?
Oh yeah,
Man,
yeah.
I love a lot of Phil Keaggy. Rex, I know you're a big fan, and Mike, you probably are too. Every single song on this album, I just absolutely ate it up and loved. I remember buying the pre-release for this, which was called Revelator. It was a pre-release EP, and John the Revelator was on there, and maybe it might have been Doing Nothing or Don't Pass Me By. But anyway, there are so many great friends out there. If you love classic rock from the 70s, now this is a 93 model album, but if you love that great classic rock sound from the 70s predominantly, but also maybe some of the 60s sounds when the 60s rocked too, it's right here. And of course, we all know Mr. Keaggy is a guitar virtuoso, has a wonderful voice, kind of reminiscent of Paul McCartney. If classic rock is your bag, then this is your album. It's a 10. Nothing wrong with that album.
Yeah, if you ask me, he sings way better than Paul McCartney. But yeah, he's done some great stuff over the years. So many great albums that Phil Keaggy has. He's also worked a lot with Randy Stonehill over the years. They've done some great stuff together. I have that album. It's great. And it really, I mean, if you're a Christian guitar player and you don't know Phil Keaggy, you've really missed something. So,
or if you're a mainstream guitar player,
yeah, he's got
really
some
missing
mainstream
something.
Attention too. But yeah,
And he's still doing stuff today, and he has his own Bandcamp website, and if you want to get concerts and stuff from there, you'll have to check it out. He has hundreds now of concerts that he has released that are really good quality and just different eras of his career.
Yeah.
So guys, those were 3 each from us. Now, did you bring anything else to the table? Mike, what else you got?
Absolutely. So here I'm going to take the road less traveled a little bit. I mean, you guys probably know this band, but I'm not sure how well everybody else will. But this is a band that only did 2 albums. And in my opinion, the first one was stellar, not a bad song on it. The second one, unfortunately, it had some good songs, but overall it was a weaker album. And what I'm talking about is Fighter, The Waiting. Absolutely stellar album in my opinion. got great rockers on it. It's got some ballads on it that are great as well. The lead vocals are done by Amy Wolter and Sean Murphy, and they're both great vocalists. And I don't know. It always made me really, really sad that they didn't do more, because this album in particular was so good. Billy Heller, their lead guitar player, was stellar. He could put together these lead guitar runs that just blew my mind, you know, how good he was. And so, yeah, that's maybe a little bit road less traveled, because probably not as many people know about that. But yeah, that's
was Bang the Drum their second album?
Yep, Bang the Drum was their second album.
Good band, good hard hitting AOR band. So good choice. And you're right, Mike. That is the road less traveled. So but that's why we're doing it. I mean, you know, it's great to remember these bands, you know, that we grew up with, a lot of us. And Rex, did you bring anything else to the table?
Oh yeah, I've got a bunch actually. This next one, I know that you'll really appreciate it, Kent. And it's the band King's X, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. That's pretty much the one. If you ask anyone what's their favorite, what's the best King's X album, that one will probably come up most of the time more than any of the other ones. And there's a couple other ones that, yeah, you could say that also. But to me, I always like that album quite a bit, from the first 4 or 5, definitely. Just that whole album is just incredible. You know, it's got Over My Head, which, you know, got a lot of MTV airplay. And I also like the song Mission. You know, just the album cover is cool looking. That was their second album. Just, you know, I can't say enough about that album. Just that whole thing is just incredible.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite from. Well, I am an avid King's X fan, especially of their first 4 albums. I think after that, this is just my opinion. To me, those first 4 albums by them were all 5-star efforts. I do think that Gretchen might shine a little bit more, maybe, but just those first 4 albums had a special quote unquote magic to them.
Mm-hmm.
The truest magic, as the Gretchen Goes to Nebraska story states. And in my humble opinion, I feel like something was lost after those first 4 albums. And, you know, that doesn't mean King's X wasn't still putting out some very good music, but there was just something special. And, yeah, good choice, Rex. Good call.
Thank you.
Guys, at the risk of me, because you all know me, once I get into something, I've got a few albums here, and I just want to briefly flash them, say a word or two, and then set them down, and then give you guys the table with what might be left with you. This is the Daniel Amos Horrendous Disc box set, and this is the version that I have. So originally this was recorded in the late 80s. It wasn't released until circa 1981, right before their Alarma album came out. So keep in mind, late 70s music on here, okay? But you talk about, again, if you're a fan of classic rock, meaning that, you know, not heavy metal, but that rocking guitar, okay, in the 70s period, this is your album. I Love You, Number 19, Hound of Heaven. This also has a lot of songs like Sky King, a lot of ELO, Electric Light Orchestra. If you like the full vocals and harmonies of ELO music, a lot of that is on here as well. You can't go wrong with Horrendous Disc by Daniel Amos, if that's your bag. This is another little box set right here. It has 4 albums. The band is Undercover. Sorry, my camera's not picking that up too well. This is their Anthology Volume 2. And the album that I'd like to showcase on this is their Devotion album. That came out in, I believe, 1992. And I'm not sure what to describe the music as. Alternative, but it's just driving all the way through. There is 1 or 2 softer numbers, but they're not ballads. They're just different. Devotion is just, it just gets the blood flowing. It's pure adrenaline. And wonderful album. Devotion from Undercover, 1992. Not a skipper on there for me. This right here, Tourniquet, Psychosurgery. 1991 model featuring Guy Ritter on lead vocals. This was the classic Tourniquet right here. Absolutely love this album. Technical thrash metal. Guy, though he's not a screamer, he's a singer. Kind of maybe in the vein of Dave Mustaine, but Guy just sounds great. Some great songs on here. I absolutely fell in love with this album. And the thing about it is, even though this is like technical thrash metal, there's hooks. Plenty of hooks with the choruses to this song, to this album. Tourniquet, Psychosurgery. Rex, you said it all with this one. I won't say any more. Rage of Angels, 10-star melodic metal album. Could have said a lot about this. Bride, Snakes in the Playground, 10-star effort, full metal all the way through. I could have said the same thing about Live to Die from Bride. And finally, my last guys, this is the second album, the second band that ever hooked me onto to rock with a Christian theme. And when I say rock with a Christian theme, I mean this album rocked. It's on rock, not a skipper in the bunch. Now we would say hard rock, but back then in 1982 when this was released, it would be considered classic metal in the vein of like AC/DC or something. But, you know, today it'd just be considered hard rock, but man, this thing rocked from top to bottom. Great album, Daniel Band, On Rock from 1982. And with that, guys, I'm personally folding. Thoughts about any of those real quick?
Well, there's some great ones in there. Bride, Snakes, that could have easily been a pick on mine as well. Love Daniel Band, you know. Let's see, I'm thinking what else you had there. I don't know. Those are the 2 that jumped out at me in particular.
Well, we're back to you, Mike, whatever you want to throw out there.
All right, so I will give you my last official pick, and then I'll probably name some honorable mentions that I could have picked as well. My last official one is the first Holy Soldier album. Stranger! You know, I mean, when you talk about somebody who really could have given Stryper competition, this was it, by all means. You know, this is, let's see, when did this, was it 1990? Yeah.
I think.
But anyway, I mean, the guitar skills demonstrated on here, the vocals from Stephen Patrick. The drummer on this album is
Terry Russell.
Terry Russell, that was his name. Incredible, you know, double bass drum work in there that just sounds incredible. Anyway, I mean, all the songs are fantastic. You know, the second album, again, was probably a little weaker than this, but still pretty good. By the time they got to their third album, they tried to enter that kind of grunge thing, and it went south fast. And they got a different lead singer. You know, if they had kept up in this vein, they could have competed with Stryper all the way. Just an incredible band, incredible album. So yeah, there's that. And then some other ones that I had considered bringing up were the first Shout album. It Won't Be Long. Also an incredible album. The first Deliverance album, getting into a bit more of the speed thrash type metal. That first album is just stellar.
That was on my list too. I just failed to grab it, but yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of a wrap for me, I suppose. Like I said, the Bride, Snakes in the Playground you mentioned could have easily been one of my picks as well. But yeah.
Well, you guys have already mentioned it, but I couldn't. This is one of the albums that came to my mind right away. And Mike, you had it in your list, was the first Boston album, and just something about that. I grew up in the '70s. You just hear that album, and it just reminds me of the '70s. I don't know how to explain that, or I just that album is just. Like you said, there is not a bad song on that album, and Brad Delp's voice is just, wow, that is just, it's unbelievable that someone could sing like that. So I never get tired of that album. Some of my honorable mentions, Res Band Civil Rights. I know that might be kind of an overlooked album at times, but for me, that's one of my favorite Res Band albums, and that thing rocks. The Who's Next, Barbara Riley, Won't Get Fooled Again. To me, that's the best Who album. And then my last one that I would pick would be the Holy Soldier debut album that you had, Mike. I agree. They would have given Stryper a run for their money also if they would have continued in that vein, and things wouldn't have changed musically. So,
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised, Rex, I must say, because as much as you love Rush and Jimi Hendrix,
I just wanted to avoid those. And some of that would be hard to pick, especially Rush. They have a couple different eras, and depending on what kind of a mood you're in. And Jimi Hendrix, there's a lot of releases after he had died. So, I just sort of stayed away from those. And there's more I could pick, though. I could have, maybe we'll have a second episode or something. I don't know. But there's more that I could have chose. But those were the ones where I thought about it for a bit. And I was like, yeah, these are the ones that I would say definitely are 10s and whatnot. So, yeah.
Do you think, guys, would it be possible for us to do an episode, this being an episode of albums that we consider 10s, do you think it's possible to differentiate between this album of 10s episode that we did and just some of our favorite albums?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe that's another thing that we could do sometime, would be an episode on just albums that we just are special to us for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
because there'd be lots of albums where maybe not every song is awesome, but still the album, kind of like I mentioned with The Hell with the Devil. I couldn't call it a 10 where every song is awesome.
Yeah. But,
talk about an iconic album that's, beloved by masses of people.
Sure. And good point. I didn't really think that through. I really enjoy that album, but I don't consider To Hell a 10. Right. But it was a very special album for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, wonderful. Well, friends out there, thank you so much for watching. And what are some of your some albums by bands that you would consider 10s. We'd love to know. We'd love to rap with you down in the comments below. So friends out there, if you're watching, please comment and let us know some albums that you consider to be 10s. We'd love to hear from you. So guys, in closing up this episode, you know, I'm always kind of reminded sometimes of scripture. Well, that sounded, what did I say? I'm always reminded sometimes. Scripture comes to mind a lot in my head is what I'm trying to say. And, you know, we were talking about 10s today, albums that we consider 10s. And so, therefore, you might say, you know, you could equivocate a 10 as that band putting their best foot forward, you know, giving their best and everything. And so, kind of along that lines about best and putting your best foot forward, you know, giving your all, giving a 10-star effort. I was reminded of 1 Corinthians 10:31. And it says in there in 1 Corinthians 10:31, whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. And so, to me, that's just kind of like saying, you know, put your best foot forward and remember that you're doing it for the Lord. And, you know, I just have to stop and consider that, you know, God gave us his best in everything. Gave us a paradise to initially live on. We tend to foul things up as humankind. One little word called sin. It's kind of a forgotten word. But I know that it's real and it exists because I'm a sinner. I don't mean to sometimes. But God gave us his best because even though humankind, we mucked up paradise here on earth, God gave us his best by coming in the flesh through Jesus the Christ, and he redeemed us. He gave us his all, his best. So may we strive to give him ours in return as thanks.
You know, back when the whole "What would Jesus do" thing was really, really popular, and everybody had the bracelets and everything, I kind of came up with a response to that. That went something like this: not necessarily what would Jesus do, but what would you do if you were doing it for Jesus?
Yeah.
So, you know, because you'd probably give him your best, right?
I would try. You bet. So, friends out there, thank you so much for watching here at Area 312. Let us know, please. Let us know what you think. Some 10 albums. Let us know an album that you think's a 10. That's all I'm trying to say. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.